A heavy, humid mist hangs over the most volatile maritime choke point on the planet. To the naked eye, the horizon is empty. But beneath the surface of the digital battlefield, a storm is gathering that no one, not the analysts at Langley, not the intelligence desks in London, and certainly not the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, predicted would happen this soon. On the bridge of an Iranian Zulfikar fast attack boat, a commander stares at his radar screen. It's clean, 0 contacts. He believes he is invisible, tucked away in one of the jagged limestone hideouts along the Musandam Peninsula. He believes his swarm of Shahed 136 drones, idling on their launchers just miles away, represents the ultimate equalizer against American naval might. He is wrong. High above, at 35,000 feet, 2 U.S. Air Force F-35A Lightning IIs are loitering in the darkness. They aren't just flying, they are vacuuming the electromagnetic spectrum. Using their AN/APG-81 active electronically scanned array radars, they have already mapped every single hidden Iranian asset from Bandar Abbas to Qeshm Island. Suddenly, the silence of the night is broken, not by an explosion, but by a flicker of light so brief it shouldn't even be visible. An Iranian UAV, launched just moments ago in a test of American resolve, simply ceases to exist. There was no missile trail, no thunderous boom of an interceptor, just a silent, invisible finger of light that turned $20,000 of Iranian engineering into molten plastic and falling scrap. Welcome to Dr. Helen R. Baer. If you're new here, you've joined us at a turning point in military history. This channel is your deep dive intelligence source for the geopolitical shifts and tactical breakthroughs that are reshaping our world in real time. What you are witnessing right now in the Persian Gulf is not just a skirmish. It is the funeral of a 3-decade-old military doctrine. Tonight, we are breaking down the insane tactical shift that occurred on April 14, 2026. We are going inside the cockpit of the F-35s that exposed Iran's most secretive coastal hideouts. And we are revealing the terrifying reality of directed energy weapons that have turned Iran's drone swarm strategy into a multi-billion-dollar graveyard. If you want to understand the real story, the one the mainstream media is too afraid to touch, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The world is moving faster than the news cycle, and you need to be here for the briefing. To understand why the F-35s did something insane, you first have to understand the asymmetric trap Iran thought they had set for the United States. For 20 years, the IRGC's denial-of-sea doctrine was built on a simple mathematical certainty: cost imbalance. Iran's logic was brilliant in its simplicity. They would manufacture suicide drones like the Shahed 136 for roughly $20,000 to $30,000 apiece. They would build fast attack boats, light, unarmored, but fast, for a fraction of the cost of a single American hull. Their plan was to saturate the Strait of Hormuz. They believed that if they fired 500 drones at a U.S. carrier strike group, the Americans would be forced to use their SM-2 and SM-6 interceptor missiles. Here is the math that kept the Pentagon up at night. An SM-6 missile costs roughly $2.1 million. If the U.S. Navy uses a $2 million missile to shoot down a $20,000 drone, Iran wins the economic war. Eventually, the American destroyers run out of tubes, meaning they run out of missiles, and the swarm finally breaks through to hit the carrier. That was the plan. Until April 2026. When the F-35s crossed into the contested zone, they weren't just looking for targets, they were acting as the eyes for a new kind of violence. Below them, the USS Preble and the USS Jack H. Lucas were waiting with a secret weapon: the Helios system. Helios stands for High Energy Laser, with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance. This is a 60-kilowatt class-directed energy weapon. For the first time in history, the infinite magazine has been achieved. Think about what this means for the armchair generals watching this. A laser shot doesn't cost $2 million. It doesn't even cost $20,000. each shot of the Helios system costs approximately the price of a gallon of diesel fuel. It is electricity turned into a weapon. The F-35s used their advanced sensor suites to paint Iranian coastal hideouts, caves and reinforced bunkers where drones were being prepped for launch. As soon as a drone cleared the mouth of a cave, the F-35 relayed the GPS coordinates via Link 16 to the destroyers. The Helios laser locked on, and in under 5 seconds, the drone was incinerated. The insane part? The F-35s were flying so low and so close to Iranian airspace that they were essentially daring the Iranian S-300 and S-400 missile batteries to lock on. But the Iranians couldn't see them. The F-35s were exposing the hideouts, directing the lasers, and remaining completely invisible to the very radars meant to protect the coast. This marks the end of the cheap drone era. Iran's billions of dollars in UAV investments were neutralized by a weapon that costs less to fire than a cup of coffee. By 1 Azar local time, the IRGC High Command in Tehran was in a state of panic. Their invisible hideouts were being picked off one by one. The 3-person Shadow Committee, the military junta currently running Iran's defense policy, made a desperate call. They ordered the masterstroke, a full-scale saturation attack. This was the scenario military planners had feared for decades. Iran launched everything. Dozens of ballistic missiles from the mountains of Kerman, cruise missiles hugging the wave tops to avoid radar, and then the swarm. Over 200 drones and 40 fast attack boats, all converging on a single point in the strait, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. This was not a probe. This was a maximum effort attempt to sink an American supercarrier. I've analyzed the telemetry from that night, and the scale of the Iranian commitment was staggering. They weren't just using Shaheds, they were using the Mohajer 6 and Arash drones, equipped with electronic warfare suites meant to jam American communications. But here is where the F-35s did something even more remarkable. Instead of retreating, the F-35s moved deeper into the swarm. Using their electronic warfare, EW suites, they didn't just track the drones, they hijacked their command signals. This is what we call cyberkinetic warfare. The F-35s identified the specific frequencies the IRGC was using to coordinate the swarm and began feeding ghost targets into the Iranian network. Suddenly, the Iranian drones began colliding with each other. The fast attack boats, confused by jammed GPS signals, started circling in the middle of the strait, unable to find their targets. And then, the wall of steel arrived. The Aegis combat system on the U.S. destroyers took over. The SM-6 missiles handled the high-altitude ballistic threats. The evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, ESSM, took out the cruise missiles. But for the 200 drones, the U.S. Navy didn't waste a single expensive interceptor. They used the Odin system, the optical dazzling interdictor, Navy. Odin is the little brother to the Helios laser. It doesn't melt the drone, it blinds it. It fires a lower power laser that overwhelms the drone's cameras and sensors. Imagine someone shining a 1,000,000 candle power flashlight directly into your eyes while you're trying to drive a car at 100 miles per hour. The Iranian drones, blinded and directionless, simply fell out of the sky. The saturation attack, which Iran had spent 30 years preparing for, lasted less than 22 minutes. Not a single Iranian projectile got within 5 miles of the American carrier. The insane part of this story isn't just the technology, it's the total humiliation. Iran threw their best punch, and the U.S. Navy swatted it away like a nuisance using electricity and stealth. The psychological foundation of the Islamic Republic, the idea that they can harness the weak to defeat the strong, collapsed in that 22-minute window. But the United States was not done. The policy of restraint ended the moment those ballistic missiles were launched. President Trump, following the love tap doctrine we've discussed before, authorized a precision counterstrike. But this wasn't a carpet bombing. It was a surgical removal of the IRGC's brain. The F-35s that had been loitering over the coast finally received the hot code, Their mission: the complete neutralization of the 4 command nodes controlling the strait: Bandar Abbas, Qeshm Island, Minab, and Bandar Kamir. Let's look at the tactical map. Bandar Abbas is the heart of the Iranian Navy. It is protected by a multi-layered air defense network, S-300 batteries, indigenous Bavar 373 systems, and thousands of anti-aircraft guns. In any previous war, attacking Bandar Abbas would have required a massive strike package of 50 or 60 aircraft. In 2026, it took 4 F-35s. The F-35s used their stealth to penetrate the ring of fire without firing a single defensive flare. They weren't using massive 2,000-pound bombs. They were using the GBU-53B Stormbreaker. The Stormbreaker is a small, smart bomb that can glide for 40 miles and hit a moving target in any weather. Each F-35 can carry 8 of them internally. The targets were surgical. They didn't hit the barracks. They didn't hit the mess halls. They hit the C4I bunkers. Command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence. In Bandar Abbas, the Stormbreakers hit the primary satellite uplink and the fiber optic junction box that connects the IRGC High Command to the coastal batteries. On Qeshm Island, they targeted the hardened cave entrances. They didn't need to destroy the mountain. They just needed to seal the hideouts. By collapsing the limestone overhangs at the cave mouths, the F-35s effectively buried the Iranian fast boat fleet alive inside their own bunkers. This was the insane move. The U.S. military didn't just attack Iran, they rendered them immobile. Within 40 minutes, the IRGC's ability to communicate along the coast was dead. The hideouts that Iran had spent decades carving into the rock were transformed into high-tech tombs. When the sun rose over the Arabian Sea the next morning, the Iranian coastal defense network wasn't just damaged, it was non-existent. The radars were silent, the radios were static, and the F-35s were already back on the deck of the Abraham Lincoln, their pilots stepping out as if they'd just finished a routine training mission. While the F-35s were blinding the brain of the IRGC, the hands of the Iranian Navy were being lopped off at sea level. This is where the AH-64 Apache enters the story. Most people think of the Apache as a tank killer in the desert. But in the Strait of Hormuz, the Apache has been evolved into the pirate killer. Operating from the decks of expeditionary sea bases like the USS Lewis B. Puller, the Apaches were unleashed on the IRGC's swarm of speedboats. If you have ever seen gun camera footage from an Apache, you know the clinical, detached nature of its violence. From 3 miles away, the Apache's TADS PNVS, Target Acquisition and Designation System, can identify the face of a man standing on a boat. The IRGC boats, armed with heavy machine guns and short-range missiles, were racing toward where they thought the American ships were. But the Apaches were waiting in the blind spots created by the F-35's jamming. The slaughter was total. The Apaches used the AGM-114 Hellfire missiles for the larger command boats. For the smaller vessels, they used the M230 30mm chain gun. I've reviewed the after-action summaries. The Iranian speedboats had no armor. The 30mm high-explosive rounds tore through the fiberglass hulls like a hot knife through butter. Because the Apaches were firing from a distance where the Iranians couldn't even hear the rotors, the boats would simply explode without warning. This is the contrast framing you need to understand. On one side, you had the Iranian crews, motivated by ideology, screaming defiance and pushing their engines to the limit. On the other side, you had a U.S. Army pilot sitting in a climate-controlled cockpit, moving a thumb joystick, and systematically deleting targets as if he were playing a video game. By 04:30 a.m., over 30 IRGC vessels were burning wrecks drifting toward the Iranian coast. The swarm had been dismantled. The asymmetric threat was proven to be a myth. The Apache, a 40-year-old platform, combined with 21st century networking, proved that no amount of numbers can overcome a superior kill chain. The IRGC's prized fast attack doctrine died that night, not with a bang, but with a series of 30mm thuds. As your host, Dr. Helen R. Baer. I have to ask, why does this feel so familiar? History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. To understand the magnitude of the F-35 strikes and the laser intercepts, we have to look back to April 18, 1988. Operation Praying Mantis. In 1988, the U.S. Navy engaged in the largest surface-to-surface naval battle since World War II. After an Iranian mine nearly sank the USS Samuel B. Roberts, the Reagan administration didn't just protest. They destroyed half of Iran's operational fleet in a single day. In 1988, it was the A-6 intruders and the SM-1 missiles. In 2026, it was the F-35s and the Helios lasers. The proper insight here is that Iran keeps making the same fatal calculation. They believe that if they can just make the cost of business high enough, the United States will leave the Persian Gulf. But as we saw on April 19, 2026, the United States has achieved something Iran didn't think was possible: escalation dominance. By using lasers that cost $1 per shot, the U.S. has removed the cost barrier. By using F-35s that can't be seen, they have removed the risk barrier. This has sent shockwaves far beyond Tehran. In Beijing, the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, is watching this with absolute terror. Why? Because China's strategy in the South China Sea is also built on drone swarms and denial of access. They just watched the U.S. Navy dismantle that entire concept in under an hour. In Moscow, the Kremlin is realizing that their strategic partner in Iran is no longer a credible threat to Western energy supplies. If Iran can't close the Strait of Hormuz, they lose their only real leverage on the global stage. What the F-35s did was more than insane tactical maneuvering. They exposed the fact that the multipolar world isn't as balanced as the pundits want you to believe. When it comes to high-end, high-stakes kinetic warfare, the gap between the United States and everyone else isn't closing. It's widening into a chasm. The hideouts are gone. The swarm is broken. And the masters of the strait are currently hiding in bunkers, wondering how they became irrelevant in their own waters. We come now to the final and perhaps most dangerous phase of this crisis. In the wake of the strikes, President Trump issued a statement that has now become legendary in diplomatic circles. He called the destruction of the Iranian command nodes and the neutralization of the swarm a nice little love tap. To the casual observer, that sounds like typical bravado. But to a geopolitical analyst, it is a chilling FOMO trigger for the Iranian regime. A love tap implies that the U.S. used only 1% of its power. It implies that the B-21 Raiders, the hypersonic missiles, and the cyber blackout tools are still sitting in the shed, waiting. It is the ultimate psychological warfare. If this was a love tap, what does a real punch look like? Right now, inside the IRGC, there is a fracture. The hardliners, the true believers, want to retaliate. They are talking about suicide attacks on American bases in Iraq and Syria. They want to prove they aren't weak. But the pragmatists, the generals who actually watch the F-35s delete their command centers, are terrified. They know that if they escalate further, the next tap won't be on a coastal bunker. It will be on the refineries in Abadan. It will be on the power grid in Tehran. The proper insight you need to take away from this video is this: the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a contested waterway. It is an American laboratory. The U.S. military just used Iran as a live-fire test range for the future of warfare. They proved that directed energy works. They proved that F-35 networking is invincible. And they proved that the hideouts of the old world can no longer protect the regimes of the past. As we move into the summer of 2026, keep your eyes on the three-person committee. Watch for the invisible leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, to make a move. If he stays silent, it means the love tap worked. If he speaks, it means the regime is choosing suicide over humiliation. I'm Dr. Helen R. Baer, and we are tracking every satellite pass and every radio intercept. This is a fluid situation, and the next 72 hours could decide the fate of the global economy. If you found value in this deep dive, do your part. Share this video. The mainstream news won't tell you about the 60-kilowatt laser specs or the Link 16 hijacking. They want you focused on the fear. We want you focused on the facts. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and leave a comment below. Do you think Iran will blink, or are we heading for a full-scale regional war? I read every single comment, and I want to hear from the strategists in this community. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. The briefing is over. I'll see you at the next update.